I'm in New Zealand, a country usually known for its sheep and dairy farming. But they have experienced a recent surge in aquaculture, and it's taking this country and the world by storm. In this episode, I'll be discovering how a company called Biomarine is successfully farming the Pacific Oyster and the challenges they face in growing this highly sought-after luxury food. Biomarine started in the late 1970s. They are situated just north of Auckland and have two farms, one in the Kaipara Harbour and one in the Mahurangi Harbour. I'm with Jim Dollimore, who started the company when he was fresh out of university.
Well, the first degree I did was in microbiology back in the 70s at Otago University, but I got really interested in diving and the sea, so I went back to Auckland University and did a degree in marine biology, a master's, and another student and I decided we'd like to get into aquaculture, which was a really new thing at the time. Aquaculture trickled along for a wee while after the Second World War, and then in the 80s started to climb. By about 2000 or so it was starting to rival wild catch fisheries, and now I think it's already surpassed it.
Oysters as an aquaculture is a relatively new industry. Although Jim has been in it since the 70s, it wasn't anything that was very big.
So everyone's ideas are as valid as the next person's, and you know, everything's got to be tried, and everything's got to be tried on a kind of an equal footing.
We're heading out on the stunning Mahurangi Harbour. This is one of the most important places of the whole operation, as this is where all of the oysters will begin their lives. Jim and his crew are continually looking for ways to improve how they grow and nurture their young oysters.
The oyster larvae spend about 2 weeks swimming around from first being fertilised to when they settle. And so you need a harbour. To catch spat, you need somewhere where it's generated and where it's retained for 2 weeks and then it settles. And this bay is pretty good, and the next bay up's even better. They seem to be retained there really well. Nearly all our oysters come from wild spat, although we are starting to experiment with hatchery production, and we're experimenting with different ways of doing that.
That's all right.
One experiment they're trying is to get the oyster larvae to attach themselves to ropes.
We started with 3 million and very few settled on the tanks, and apparently none went down the drain, but so there should be millions. But
yeah, I mean, I reckon
there's not, but we'll see.
Whilst the ropes don't appear to be working overly well at this point, they already have another plan in action.
These are our little babies, so we really like these. Open it and we'll have a look and see what we think.
Sounds like there's something in there, Jim.
Yeah, see, you couldn't actually see them when we got them. You couldn't see them as individual oysters. They were just a grey mess.
Look, they look good though, Jim.
Yeah.
Nice and uniform.
The precious hatchery spat, which aren't much bigger than grains of sand, are carefully transferred into new containers, which will keep them safe and allow them more room to grow. So what I hold here in my hands is approximately future 15-tonne worth of oysters, which will be harvested in around a year and a half's time. At the moment, the bulk of their oysters come from wild spat, which attach themselves to wooden sticks.
So these are the bundles. So this is actually how the oyster's actually caught. So if you actually look in between each line, each of the sticks there, you can see the ketchup spat. So we're just going to be separating these bundles. They would have been down since January.
Once the bundles are dismantled, the sticks full of spat need to be nailed back in place out in the harbour, in preparation for next year's harvest.
Yep. So these are what we use to put the sticks out. Instead of running a petrol generator or an air compressor sort of thing to put the sticks out in the salt water, we just run simple dive tanks for our air brad nail guns, so they float in the water beside us and we can use them to nail the sticks out as we go along the rows here.
This saves them from having to use petrol-powered machinery, which will rust in the salt water. At the end of each day, they just send the tanks back to the dive shop to be refilled.
This is your end product. So once you've nailed them out, you get this about 1.5 years later.
The sticks are coated with concrete so the oysters come off easily. They're then taken to the sorting shed, where the next part of their journey begins.
I love just being out on the water in general. The sunrises and the sunsets, just the views over here are just incredible. I really enjoy that. The people that you work with, they're your friends as well. When you're sitting out here in the rain and you're thinking, oh well, it could be worse, and an old mate who wants to be doing a 9 to 5 in an office is thinking, no, this is the worst thing I've ever done, and you won't see him the next day. The hard bits is definitely the wind. I don't mind the rain. I hate the wind because she likes to blow your barge around, and it can be quite frustrating then.
I was chasing the tide pretty hard one day, and I was trying to be sneaky and think, oh, I'll just get one more barge length, and we put it on and tried to push, and that was it. She was not going anywhere. We had to wait another 6 hours for the tide to come back in on the other side to go home, so it can make for a very long day. Everyone's had their fair share of getting stuck. Jim, when he built them many years ago, he actually cambered them both sides so that they're easy to push across the mud if you do have to push them, because once they hit the mud they do actually sort of squish in there and they suck to the bottom as well, so it can be quite hard to push them off again. So basically at the moment you can see she's fairly wet out there. It's been raining constantly on and off over the last couple of days. Well, the harbour is now closed. MPI, which is the Ministry of Primary Industries, they take hold of that. It all comes down to how much fresh water and how much runoff is coming off the land. And you get nasties in there like E. coli, which can make people sick. And we've got a criteria to know whether we're open or closed. And that all comes down to how much rain's fallen. So we harvested this morning, obviously through a rain closure. They'll be taken up this afternoon and they'll be declumped tomorrow morning. And we can truck those over to Kaipara tomorrow afternoon, and they'll be put back out on the harbour. Yeah, so that's very lucky for us because we can keep working throughout the rain closures, especially on the Mahurangi here. Whereas other smaller farmers that only have farms here, they have to harvest their oysters if they're harvesting sticks, declump them, and if they've got bag space, put them back into bags and wait for the harbour to reopen again before they can harvest on.
I'm now at the Biomarine sorting shed, where the oysters come once they've been harvested from the Mahurangi harbour.
So the water crew would go down, bring us the oysters in, we'd get our batch together, tip them into the hopper, they go up an elevator belt, they'd come down in front of us, we're on a carousel, and we're breaking them up. You just put your knife in there and you lever it.
Wow.
And all of them are that simple.
You'll end up with oysters all of a uniform size?
Yes, uniform size, and we're only concentrating on the shape. And so really, with the declump, we're really the engine room of the whole business. Without us grading this, if we give any rubbish to the pack house, they'll just throw it away, so we try and cut the cost here. So we've actually got somebody in there sorting big to small, and the small go back, we treat them like our seeds. Ike takes them back, puts them into the mesh bags and grows them. His time frame for that is probably another 4 months down there, so we're picking out the very best of the babies and treating them like seeds.
When we first start, we count out a bag, 5 dozen oysters on each side, and it's roughly up to there. So we just count out our first bag, and then we just go to that level with the rest of the bags. We had to change this clip system here because they had just hardline clips, but they weren't working too well out here in the rough water, so we had to change it to these. Yeah, that's our zebra bag.
However, there are some things they can't control, like when nature throws them a curveball.
In 2010, we noticed a mass oyster die-off at the end of summer. One of the farmers in Coromandel rang around and said that all his oysters were dying. When the oyster farmers in the other areas went out to their farms, sure, their oysters were all dying too. We sent samples away and checked for all the known common parasites and couldn't find any of those. The deaths stopped after a few weeks and the waters cooled down. No more died, the rest were fine. And we thought hopefully it's some environmental catastrophe that'll never happen again. But in early November it started to happen again. It was everywhere. So we knew we had a real problem. We sent samples to Biosecurity New Zealand and they identified a thing called Ostrea herpes virus microvariant, and it was ravaging the oyster beds. We were lucky in a way because the Ostrea herpes virus killed the juvenile oysters more than the adult ones. So fairly rapidly the population develops a resilience to that sort of virus, and now they seem to be living together reasonably well.
Okay, so what we're doing here is we have the maharangi on the other side over there. They harvest the oysters and then we throw them over the table, and we'll bag them up and put them into the farm as either grow on or to condition for shell, and condition the meat and the muscle and ready it for live. The grow on will go down and we'll bag that up and we'll put it into about small amounts in the basket, and they will then grow on to about half the basket, and that'll be about 5 to 6 months, and then we'll either bring it through, chuck it through another sorting table, and then either if it hasn't grown we'll put it back down for another 5 months, or we'll move it onto the high lines to condition and rumble that shell up. It just covers in there nicely, and then those oysters will act like that out on the water, and you'll see today some finished product, and it's really nice and smooth shell and all ready here. Sweet.
It's not difficult to get up early when this is your office. However, you wouldn't know it today, but the Kaipara Harbour is one of the most volatile places in the world to farm oysters.
We've learnt over the last 9 or 10 years that things have to be resilient, but they can't be rigid. So everything we built initially that was bolted together and screwed together and made out of rigid stuff is broken. We've ended up with everything being quite flexible, quite compliant, as much as possible tied together with rope, which is much more resistant to breaking. So we're learning to kind of go with the flow, really, with the environment. Let the waves, let the things move stuff, but gradually dissipate, you know, in our structures rather than trying to stop it with something solid.
The oysters are strung out on long lines in baskets, and somehow I've been roped into giving it a go.
So basically, when you got the bag, you have the clip facing towards you.
Yep.
You hold the rope.
Yep.
And slip it towards the sea.
Slip it towards the sea. Easy as that.
Yep. Easy as pie.
Easy peasy. Right, let's give it a go. Right, AJ, let's see if I can do this. Ready?
Yep. Yep. Excellent.
Then I saw you. Oh, I can't pick that off the boat. You make it look so easy.
Oh, I've done a few thousand of them.
Done a few. And then how come mine's not hanging very well? Oh, so you pull it right down so it rests on the plastic.
We try and keep all the bags bucked up together so they're moving as one,
yeah,
instead of moving as singly. Not too bad.
We're going to replace the buoy because the ropes tend to wear out. There's a lot of movement in the sea. So we've cut the old one off, we've replaced the rope, and I'm about to hang it. Let's see how I go.
So basically, when you put any buoys and they're on long lines, if you have your finger caught in there, like that,
Danger. Yep.
and the line goes off, you're going to go with it and you don't want that.
Cold in there, isn't it, AJ?
It's cold and it's got great whites.
Didn't tell me that before I got on the boat. Hang on a minute. It's over the rope, AJ?
Yep.
Yep. Oh, I hope I don't drop it. And then you just let it hang.
Yeah, perfect.
It's very hard work. I don't know how they do it all day.
The Kaipara is a very, very rough environment. There's a lot of waves, a lot of wind. It's pretty severe.
Got your flippers on, eh?
Yeah, mate, yeah, mate.
And so we've developed this technique where we lift them up to about mid-tide level, leave them rumbling around in the waves. The oysters actually get smaller, so we can only do it for say 4, 5, 6 weeks, but they all polish up. They're much smoother, very, very clean, have obviously no fouling or dirt or anything on it because of the movement and because of the rumbling together. All New Zealand oysters are among the best in the world. We have a very strict food safety regime here, and we've got a lot of advantages. It's a lot easier to have that in New Zealand. We've got a much easier environment to achieve that. The Kaipara is the epitome of that. It's miles, not even close to shore, a long way from any land-based activities. And also we have very low population pressure on the near-shore environment.
Biomarine has a very creative team, and evidence of this can be seen everywhere. They've worked out ways to make even the simplest of tasks more efficient.
Tell me about this. What is this, Llewellyn?
Instead of sitting and cutting thousands of pieces of rope, all we do is we wind it on, and that allows us to do one cut. So one cut, I now have a whole work, yeah. So what I do is...
So that's turned a 15-minute job into a 30-second job?
Yeah, instead of having someone sitting there and cutting each one. We're continuously experimenting with the ropes. You get different layers of ropes. So what we're finding is that although we might think by going to a harder lay, it's going to be a lot easier on the clips and that, but what we found is that because it's so strong, you now have a reverse system where the clips are wearing faster than the ropes. So we've got to really find a balance what works. It's basically taking, you know, the less of the two evils. I wish I could go along to Bunnings and buy all these things, but unfortunately we had to go out there and learn the hard way. It's been years of failing. You just see the growth of the guys as well because they're young, you know what I mean? These guys will be the leaders in the future. Good bunch of guys.
The Kaipara Harbour is unforgiving. You have to gel as one. We think that communication is the key.
I'm here in front of the processing plant at Biomarine. This is where they process their Pacific oysters and prepare them ready for export.
A lot of forward planning's gone into designing and building this plant. Pretty new plant, it's around 3 years old.
The factory kind of evolved rather than was designed because we didn't have enough money for an architect. And so it's on wooden piles and they're stacked up one on top of another and pushed down till they hit the rock at 25 metres down. But rather than saw those off, we decided to leave them sticking 1.5 metres out of the ground and build the whole building up. The idea of that was that air would flow under the building so that where our freezer was, there's no possibility of freezer frost heave and the freezer falling to bits. We didn't have to put pipes or wires underneath it. Trucks could back up to it rather than down to it. It's been a great success, really. It's ended up one of the best ideas.
At the moment, we're going to be somewhere in the vicinity of 500,000 dozen oysters processed per year, and the aim is to take that up to 1 million dozen. And the main activity that's going on here is that we're opening frozen half-shell oysters, and then they clean quickly, make sure there's no shell on them, and then they go through the blast freezer. The other oysters that we're processing through here are live oysters, and they basically just come in, they're graded for size, packed and loaded out.
And the vast majority are exported all over the world, including destinations such as Japan, Europe and the United States.
We want to be good environmental stewards, and we want to make the work satisfying for the people, and there's heaps of room for innovation and ideas, and it's exciting for everybody.
Well, Gus, this is the part I've been most excited about, tasting these wonderful Kaipara oysters.
These are our medium grade oysters from Kaipara Harbour. They've been rumbled for 4 to 5 weeks, so the edges are quite rounded and smooth, and they're really coming into peak condition now.
Sounds great, let's
try
get
one.
into it.
Yeah.
So good.
It's quite nice, isn't it?
Absolutely supreme.
Cheers.
Cheers. Biomarine's commitment to sustainability and the environment is certainly helping to uphold New Zealand's clean, green reputation. I'm impressed by their pride in their product, their shared camaraderie and creative spirit, which has been there right from the start.
And now they're at the point where their oysters are in high demand all over the world. And I can see why, because they're delicious. In fact, I think I'm going to go and see if they need me to taste some more.